Hi there, and welcome to our weekly craft, a source for ideas, inspiration, and fun for crafters. I'm Sarah White, Chief Maker at ourdailycraft.com, and today I'd like to talk to you about New Year's resolutions and how they often go awry really fast in my world. A little update on my mindful crafting experiments, some things that I'm working on, and I'm going to try not to cough too much, and hopefully my daughter won't barge in because she's right on the other side of that door. So let's dive in and get started. First, I want to introduce you to Em, short for Emerald. She is my dress form, and she's wearing the bulky vest that I shared with you in episode 1. I just thought it would be a little more interesting than just having the door back there if I had something a little more visual back there for you to look at. If I keep her, we'll probably change her clothes every time, but we'll see. What I am wearing, more interestingly, is this great raglan bulky sweater that needs depilling because it's old. This is Nutmeg by Jennifer Stark. I wanted to say that it was one of the first sweaters I knit when I started knitting again, but I don't think that's actually possible because it wasn't released until 2012. But I've probably had it a good 10 years almost now. It's a really simple, really fast pattern. I love it. This is Plymouth Yarn Baby Alpaca Grande, and it's super soft and fuzzy, and it does pill like a lot, but it's also 10 years old. So, having to do a little maintenance on the sweater to keep it wearable for 10 years is not really a big deal. So I'm okay with that. So that out of the way, I did want to talk about New Year's resolutions because somehow it's only just the end of January, and I think that I talked a little bit in episode 1 about the fact that I'm trying to knit more from my stash. That's where this vest came from, because I was using yarn from my stash and just trying to come up with something easy to make to pare down the stash a little bit. And so I'm always mindful of trying to use the yarn that I already have. And I had made like a double resolution this year that I was going to not buy more yarn and not buy more patterns, because I have a lot of pattern books. I've bought a lot of patterns. I have a collection of free patterns and patterns from magazines and all sorts of things that I've always wanted to knit, or maybe not even always, but recently wanted to knit that I just haven't gotten to. And so that was my dual resolution or plan for the year, if you want to call it that, more than a resolution, to just use what I have, which makes sense, right? So I made it, all of 21 days maybe before I bought any yarn, but I had a good reason. So my loophole for both the new patterns and the new yarn rules, if you want to call them that, was if I wanted to do a test knit, that I could get yarn for that particular project, and then I'd be getting a new pattern also because I'd be test knitting. So in my fit of stress knitting induced wanting to start a bunch of new projects, which I sort of talked about in episode 2, I applied for a whole bunch of test projects for both knitting and crochet, and I happened to get accepted for both a knitting project and a crochet project on the same day, I think, even, but the timelines are different, so I think I should be able to still do both. I will be able to still do both. Obviously, I committed to both. I'm going to do both. But the crochet project, which I haven't started yet, is a cowl, and I can use stash for that one because it's worsted weight and it's, written to be where it can be a stash busting project. So that's totally fine. But for the knitting project, which is a skirt, I needed fingering weight yarn and I wanted it to match, obviously. So I allowed myself to buy some new yarn. This is the ball that I've wound for doing my swatches. And we'll get to that in a second, but it's Knit Picks Hawthorne. It's a kettle dyed I believe the colorway is called Serpent, but I could be wrong about that, so I will put it in the show notes if I'm wrong about that. It's beautiful. It's just a nice, soft, easy to work with, pretty yarn, and it's going to be a skirt someday soon. I haven't actually made any progress on the actual skirt yet, and you'll see that I've got a little tiny because I'm working on the swatch here. Because even though I got the yarn 4 days ago, I've just been swatching and swatching. So this is a little bit of, I don't know if you'd call it mindless, or just thinking I know more than the designer does, or thinking that my experience in the past is going to be my experience in the future, or what, I don't know. But based on other projects that I'd done recently, knowing that this was a fingering weight yarn project, and what the gauge was, which is supposed to be, I think 6 stitches to the inch, I was like, for sure, I'm gonna need like a size 2 needle. So I started with a size 2 needle. It's supposed to be worked in the round, so that's why there's strings on the back, because I'll show you on the one that I'm knitting how you do that if you don't know. And I really like the fabric at this, but it's like 27 stitches to 4 inches instead of 24. So that's not quite what we're going for this particular project, but I do like that. And then, so I jumped up to a 4, and I think I got like 21 stitches or something like that. And for some reason, by the time I had knit these 2 swatches in 2 days, I had it in my mind that it was supposed to be 20 stitches to the 4 inches and not 24 stitches to 4 inches. And so I knit my next swatch on a size 5 needle when I really should have knitted on a size 3 needle, because I needed more stitches. So I needed a smaller needle, not a bigger needle, which would give me fewer stitches. So the swatch I knit yesterday, I did on a size 5 needle. The pattern called for a size 6 needle. And so I was like, really, I'm going to end up using the size that the pattern called for anyway. But it's not true, because now this is 21 stitches, or I can't remember now. It's still wrong, obviously. No, this one is 20 and this one was 21, I think. Anyway, doesn't matter. They're all wrong. So I found the one size 3 needle that I think I own, which is clearly not big enough to knit a skirt on, but it's okay for a swatch, and I can get started on it. And if I need to buy a bigger needle later, I can do so. So hopefully 4th time will be the charm, right? And I'll be able to actually cast on the project here pretty soon, because time's a wasting while I am swatching. In case you're curious how to knit a swatch in the round without actually knitting it in the round, you need to be able to knit every stitch of every row. So what you do is you just work it on a circular needle, but instead of turning the work, when you get to the end of the row, you slide the stitches back to the other end, and then you just loosely thread your working yarn across the back, and then you start to knit from there. And so when you are done, like you probably saw on these other swatches, you can see that there's a bunch of strings on the back. If you wanted to, you could cut them to make your swatch lie totally flat. I don't do that because I might need this yarn later, so I don't want to, especially since I will have knit 4 swatches, it's likely I might need some of this yarn later. So I want to be able to unwind it and use the yarn again if I need to, but sometimes people will just cut up the middle and lay it flat to measure their gauge, but I am not that fancy or dedicated to swatching, even though I'm pretty dedicated to swatching since I'm now on my 4th one. In any case, so that's one of the things I'm working on right now, is quite a lot of swatches. I also last week spent a good deal of time knitting hearts, which I'll show you. These were my 3. I had a prototype one that has become a cat toy already. But these 3 are all from the same pattern. So it's funny to me that this one came out smaller, and I don't think it's because I messed it up, but you know, it's possible. I think it's just because, again, gauge is a thing. And so these two came out pretty close to the same size, and then this one came out smaller because the gauge is a little different. They're all worsted weight yarn, and I used a size 6 needle for these. Each one I used a different increase at the bottom. And so I think this one was Knit Two Togethers. This one is backward loop cast on, and then this one is Make Ones. It's hard to tell on the video the difference, but they all look just a little bit different. I think the backward loop cast on one is actually my favorite. They just look really clean. It makes a nice little line. And then it's worked completely in the round. So you start with 6 stitches, and you put those onto double pointed needles and work up, increasing, and then there's a few rows straight, rounds straight, and then you'd work on each half, and they're just decreased with Knit Two Togethers and slip knits. And it's just a cute little Valentine's Day project if you have like teacher appreciation coming up, or you want to make one for your kids like in their backpack or whatever. This pattern is on Our Daily Craft, and I will link it in the show notes. They're really fun and easy and cute, and I stuffed them with like my leftover yarn pieces and little pieces of fabric, and so it's a good, like, not only using your stash but using the little leftover bits that never get used in anything, and that you might, I don't know, am I the only one who does this, that I just keep my little yarn ends and my little cast off bits of fabric because they'll be useful for something, right? Well, this is the thing that they're useful for, so that's a handy thing. So I have been reading. I finished Harlem Shuffle, which I talked about last week. It was fun. It is kind of a heist book, and Colson Whitehead, anything he writes is interesting, even topics you're not particularly interested in. The way he writes is just nice. It's easy reading, even, I mean, Nickel Boys wasn't easy reading, but it's enjoyable reading even when the topics are hard, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that was fun. I'm still reading Les Miserables. I think I'm about 680 pages in. I just hit the halfway point a couple days ago, which was very exciting, except my Kindle still says I have about 38 hours to go, and I hope that that's not true because I'm not sure that I can endure that much. But I mean, I feel like it's worthwhile, but it is a lot of work. So I also started this week as a kind of filler reading the Potlicker Papers by John T. Edge. It is about Southern food and how food and cooking and restaurants and all of that played into the civil rights movement and Southern history of the modern era. So my daughter did just sneak in for a second, but I think we're okay now, and I'll try to wrap this up. But I did just remember that I didn't talk about my mindful crafting experiment. So in the last episode, I talked a little bit about how I've been stress knitting, and, you know, as stress relieving outlets go, that's not a bad one, but that I just felt like I wasn't getting out of it what I could be getting out of it because I was always knitting and doing something else, and I wasn't like really focused on what I was doing, and it just wasn't feeling fun or nice or stress relieving, which is what the whole point of doing something for stress is supposed to be, I think. So I have been trying to be more mindful about spending at least a little time each day just knitting or just crocheting and not doing anything else. And it's weird. Like, I'm so used to doing it just while I'm reading or in front of the TV or at my desk at work, which is, you know, right over there. But I'm rarely monotasking at any point in my day. So it has been like I do really have to think about that I'm going to take the time to do that, and that I'm going to sit and just do that for a few minutes. And I mean, I think it's good, like it's a good practice, but it's not probably something I would habitually do, and maybe it should be, but I'll keep trying. But I don't know that it'll be like an everyday thing all the time, because I also just like also reading and watching TV, and I have limited time, so I can't do just one thing a lot of the time during the day. So we'll see how that continues. But it has been interesting as an experiment to do some of that. I hope that if you tried that too, that you will let me know what it was like for you. And if you haven't tried it, you should, because it is nice to just focus on one thing for a change and to really like slow down and pay attention to what you're doing and how it feels. And I mean, we got into crafts because we enjoy the doing, I hope, as well as the having the thing that we made. So it's just kind of about getting more into the process than maybe I've been, and maybe than you've been as well. So it's just something to think about as we go on into the year. Okay, we talked about books. Still not watching a lot because still working on the month of yoga, which I'm 3 days behind on now. But I think, I'll be able to complete it in early February, and that'll be good. My husband and I did finish watching Gentefied, which is on Netflix. It's a story about a family in East LA who own a taco shop, and the grandfather is kind of holding the family together, and he is undocumented, and it's about, their story of, gentrification coming into their neighborhood and trying to hold on to a small family business. And there's just like a lot to the story, and I really enjoyed the characters. It's 2 seasons, and I don't think it was renewed for a third, so the story's done, and they did wrap it up nicely. So it's not like a series where you start it and it just ends and it's unsatisfying. So I think that you should check that out. And I would love some recommendations, because we're kind of running out of things that we watch together. Like, we do a show in the evenings often after our daughter goes to bed, and we're kind of running out of things. We're watching also What We Do in the Shadows, but we've only got like 5 episodes left of that. So we need some new things. If you've got a show that you've been enjoying, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Also, I'd love to know what you're working on. If you do test knitting or test crochet, I'd like to hear about that too, because I'm sort of just getting into that in the past couple months. I had some time and I'm enjoying it, but would love to hear your thoughts on that, and if you've done it, if you have tips. But I think that's all for this week. So thanks so much for watching. I hope that you have a great crafty week. I'll see you soon.